live from Barcelona, where Service Design Disrupted will take place this October. Primer el cor, després la tècnica. I hope to meet you there. Join the service newsletter and buy your tickets today at www.sddisrupted.com.
There we go, and we are live on LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube. My name is Obradors-Puerto. I am from Service Design Disrupted, and you are watching Preludes to Service Design Disrupted, conversations with some of our speakers, our board, and some interesting people about things that we are going to be doing at Service Design Disrupted in Barcelona, the 15th and 16th of October. I will be amiss to mention that you need to go to sddisrupted.com to go sign up for our newsletter and also buy tickets now. The price is really good, so please sign up and join us in Barcelona. Now, I'm really excited for today's conversation. Today, you're not going to listen to my strange accent. You are going to see one of my dear colleagues, someone who's working with me on Service Design Disrupted, Andrea Obradors. She's a service designer, future practitioner, and serious dreamer with over 10 years of experience in design thinking, strategic design, design management, and project development. She helps a lot on Service Disrupted with our board. And I would have missed to say that she's also an awesome mother. We get to see her kids and her family on all the calls, and that is really endearing and something that we appreciate. And then our very, very special guest today is Rachael Dietkus, an internationally recognized leader in trauma-informed design, civic tech, ethics, and public interests in service design. Super important topic. I used to think that, that's interesting things, it's good to know. And I think with all the technology and all the changes happening in the world, this is something that has become really important. So I'm really excited to listen to Andrea and Rachel's conversation today. Also, when I thought about doing this introduction, I had a conversation with Rachael, but I didn't realize how much she's achieved in her career. For one thing is in 2022, Rachael was the first social worker designer at the US Digital Service at the White House, which I think is pretty cool, amongst many other things. I hear there's also a book in the works. But then I wanted to describe Rachael a little bit, and as someone who hasn't had many conversations, but really cool conversations with her, I found something on her profile that I thought really is meaningful. And she wrote this: "At the heart of my work is a simple belief. The way we design systems shapes how people experience safety, dignity, belonging, and mattering." And that is no matter how big or small. So I'm really excited about it. And with further ado, let me bring them all on screen here. And maybe I should also have myself there for a moment. I have Andrea and Rachael, both of you. Thank you for doing this. And Andrea, over to you.
Thank you so much, Werner. So nice to see you again, Rachael. It's always a pleasure.
Likewise. Thank you, both of you.
Yeah. So let's go to the thing, right? I feel that everyone wants to hear more about you and your perspective on this. So I think that first of all, I just wanted to ask you, when I think about you, I think about care, right? And then I wonder, what would you think that people would think when they hear care in a design context, right? Like what do you think people often understand when they hear this word, and what they have been missing maybe?
I think the first thing that you said is it kind of catches my breath here a little bit. Just when you said, when I think about you, I think about care. It just feels like I can't think of a higher compliment, on the spot. I think that when people hear about care, or even hear me or others talk about care, I think there's an immediate assumption that when we use the word care, we're automatically thinking about kindness, niceness, empathy, another dimension of empathy, because empathy is often talked about in design, and especially human-centered design. We think that care might mean being warm, having good intentions. But when I think about the way I think about care, I've been thinking about it as both these demonstrations. So I think of it as an action. I think about it as part of the scaffolding and the structure and the infrastructures that we are building as we are designing whatever it is that we might be designing. So whether that's a product or a service or an experience. I also, again, putting it in these contexts of the types of like work that I often do, the work that I am observing other people do. I think about care as part of these like conditions of the work. And that might be something that we get into a little bit, like what are these specific examples of that, like, what does this look like? I think something else is that I think something that I see are these different aspects of care. So if you just look at the word care and then careful, consider careless or carelessness. There are also these pieces of caregiving, care receiving. So I think there are many dimensions of it that have quite a bit of both depth and breadth that we don't necessarily consider as part of an integral piece of the work that we're doing. I see it as again, just more beyond just a thing that we say that we do, but actually an expression of that demonstration of what we do. So again, coming back to like these actions that we take, moving beyond just expressions, but actually like how can we demonstrate that these are things that people are feeling and receiving as part of this process or part of any of these processes that we're doing in design.
Yeah. Something that I really like that you mentioned is that this care shouldn't be passive, or it should be active, right? It should be kind of like the materializing everything we do, basically, right? So I wonder, like, how would you describe, what does evidence of care look like in a project, in the things that we do, in an event, or even in a daily conversation with one of our teammates or with ourselves?
Yeah. So some of these things that I might mention, think of them in the context of a project, but also think about them in the context of you as a practitioner, as part of maybe a team who's making contributions to a thing, whatever that thing is. So I think some of these different, like the evidence of care, I think is often coming through in the preparation. So are we taking the time to prepare both ourselves and others who are being invited into these processes? Are we taking the time to prepare people and to let them know what to expect or what to anticipate? I think another aspect that is talked about quite a bit in design is consent. So I see consent as evidence of care. So the way that we practice consent, and again, like I've seen bare minimum aspects and practices of consent, and I've also seen these really beautiful like expansions of consent that are fluid and that are open and that have no time limitation. To me, like that's like the one of the greatest expressions of consent as an aspect of care, as an evidence of care. I'm really big on pacing, so I think making sure that that we are both allowing ourselves time and that we are mindful of these allotments of time that we have to do this work. Something that was very evident to me is like it was such a strong evidence of a lack of good pacing or a lack of care was in quite a bit of like civic technology work, where there was just very pervasive like false senses of urgency. And it was jarring to me as a social worker who had worked in contexts where there was like constant real urgency. So early on in my social work career, I worked in healthcare. I worked at the Veterans Affairs here in the US. And lots of urgency, so there wasn't this urgency culture that was pervasive. It was like a hospital setting where we have the various elements of care are needing to have attention to them, often in dire situations. And so I became conditioned to really pay attention to like what is like true urgency and what is like a fabricated or a false sense of urgency, and how do we practice that discernment between, not so much between those two, but on that continuum of what is real and not. And so I think pacing is a big component of that. So to not rush people through various aspects of complexity, or when we are feeling like those tensions around ethics, like to not like, make people go faster than is unnecessary.
Right.
I think following up with people is like an aspect of care. So again, like when you look at the traditional formula of human-centered design thinking, these different practices, depending on not even like, it's not even dependent on like the context that you're in. Like there is a very, very similar formula in healthcare, in higher education, in civic technology, in social impact. I mean, I've seen like variations and shades of all of this. And I think when we are able to like close a loop and actually follow up with people, or give people an update, let them know like maybe how their information was used or what their contributions like meant to people or to a project. I think those are like aspects of care that just allow people to know that they didn't disappear after they might have done something that was actually quite meaningful. Two other things that I'll mention, like one is around just like accessibility. So like, what are these different ways that people are able to actually actively engage and participate without there needing to be this massive amount of effort in order for them to just be able to have a presence and be included. And then I think also, I think just being honest and being real when the work is hard. So, and sometimes it's really as simple as just saying like, wow, this was really difficult, or I'm struggling with this, or like, I need to take a break and maybe come back to this. I think there's quite a bit of either masking or pretending that I see. A lot of people like
Especially
performing that
nowadays,
they're
right?
okay. Oh yeah, just like pretending that they're okay. And I think, I think that there's I don't want to say that as like a judgment on others, as if I have never ever done that myself. Like I have definitely done that myself. I have some distinct moments, especially even as a social worker, where I had to truly like compartmentalize like what my needs were in the moment to get through like a very difficult thing that had to be navigated, like with the family member of a patient. But I truly believe I like emotionally and physiologically, I paid a price for doing that. Even though I had to do that in that moment, like I paid a price, and
Absolutely.
the act of doing that like lingered with me, And so I think when we can be real about, like, again, just even saying like, hey, like I had to do this thing and I made the best decision that I could in the moment based off of what I had at my disposal. And I don't want to do that again. And this is why I don't want to do that again, or not even having to explain like why we don't want to do that again. I just feel like those are some of those different aspects that I feel like are like the evidence of what that could look like.
Yeah. And in our prep call, you mentioned something that really stuck with us. And it's, please, I'm trying to quote you, but I'm sure that I'll do a bad job at it. But
No.
that like, this is a daily practice and not a commitment to perfection, right? And you said that, or something about getting it. It's not about getting it right. It is about showing up for it daily. And I think it's very connected to what we are speaking about right now. Like, what do you think that daily practice look like when we are not just tired, devastated, or under pressure, but busy, and not only with the things that happen like in our daily work, but also behind the scenes in our daily lives?
Mm. Oh, I don't think I've ever been. it has come up in conversation, this phrasing of like a commitment to a daily practice, and sometimes like the story of hearing someone say that explicitly in a project. It's back in 2021. But I think so what does it look like in practice? I think it is often happening in these really, really boring moments that are just not going to sound remotely like shiny or even exciting. So I think it comes in moments for you. For me, what it looks like is often thinking about both thinking about and also like responding to like when something is coming up for me. So if I'm feeling like a little bit of a like my own like heart racing, or like my stomach flipping, like feeling like a certain kind of like nervousness. So again, like kind of tapping into like my own like inner like physiological like responses that are just naturally occurring. Like, why are those things occurring? So getting curious about my own like physical reactions, and sometimes like emotional and psychological reactions to like the environment or to the conditions of what is occurring. I think, for me, I've really had to pay close attention to this practice of like excavation and pulling back like and trying to understand like the why and like the motivation behind like the ways that I might work, or the ways that others might work. So this was a part of a conversation that was happening like earlier in a team meeting. We were just talking about just this value and this importance of like introspection, and again, like this might be called different things in different like contexts. So it might be called like, being curious, like having humility. What it shows up to me is like really having a deep and honest curiosity and authentic curiosity around like the motivation behind why people do things the way that they do. Um, I think it's also important to say that it's okay to not get these things right every time. I mean, I certainly like stumble with these things, probably on a daily basis, and in small, medium, and large ways. So, but ultimately, I do think it comes down to this practice of like noticing, making adjustments along the way, returning to things like as you may need to return to something, like engaging in this practice of repair when we need to repair situations, or again, like get this deeper like understanding. I think removing as much of that pressure on both ourselves to perform or to perfect, to do these things in a perfect shiny way, I think really alleviates some of those other tendencies like urgency, perfectionism, performance. Just, what are those ways that you can show up like truly authentically as who you are, as like your true self, as opposed to like the mask that we are often bringing into this work in order just to get through or just to get by. Like I'd much rather live a life of imperfection that is gives me some energy to do other things, as opposed to a life of performative perfection that just simply exhausts me.
I mean, I feel like you're talking to, a bunch of designers out here, and I feel like perfectionism is going to be a word that definitely is going to tackle a lot of them, or trigger them at least. And since we're talking about the field, and I also want to go back to you sit across social work, right? Design, public interest technology, which is kind of unusual, an unusual intersection, but you don't know how much I appreciate that someone like you exists. But how those start kind of like speaking to each other for you?
Yeah, I think the origin story of some of this. I mean, there's really like 2 points of origin. One was that the short version is that I started out as an art and design student many, many years ago as an undergrad. And so some of that interest and curiosity and like a drive for more creative pursuits has been there for quite some time. I'm also a musician, so I've played the violin primarily for many, many years at this point. And so there's some like art, you could say there's like these like artistic and creative aspects that have just been like naturally woven into like both my personal life and maybe my professional life as well. But I think when I think about this more explicit intersection of both social work and design, it really started to have a presence, I would say, in the early 2000s, when I was doing some activist work around the death penalty here in the US. And so here's this explicit like activist and programmatic work that I was doing in the state of Illinois. And because of the attention on the topic and the spotlight of what was happening in Illinois at that time, there was a lot of interest with musicians and artists and designers to want to contribute in some way, shape, or form. And so there was this like remarkable designer, graphic designer, he's still a graphic designer, named Chris May, who had reached out to me through a friend and wanted to build up his portfolio. And so one of the projects that he offered to work on with me was creating a brochure for the organization that I was working for at the time. And I just remember I don't remember him using any like explicit like human-centered design centric language, but he essentially was like shadowing me for like several days and off and on over like a handful of weeks. And he was attending meetings with me. We were having informal conversations. I mean, he was doing like kind of like research, like collaborative research with me. And he was learning about what it was that we were doing as an organization. He was building up his own like awareness and understanding of the complexity of what we were trying to do. He understood the spotlight, both like the national, but the international spotlight that Illinois had at that time. And so I just remember him like showing me these early on like prototypes of the creative direction of where he was going with the graphic design of this like tangible brochure. And it just I just remember feeling so alive in this process. And I loved being able to talk about this organization that I worked for, this effort that I felt very passionate about. I loved being able to have this truly like co-creative process that we were like deeply engaged in. So that was like one of those examples. And again, this is sort of like it was like I was clearly on this pathway to becoming a social worker, but it was like several years before I actually ended up formally pursuing social work. And then there are just these other moments, like while doing like later on when I became a social worker, where I was working at Veterans Affairs, and I was the local program coordinator for the Healthcare for Homeless Veterans program. And there was a regional meeting of a bunch of us who were doing this kind of work. And there was, they were essentially like design researchers that were with a nonprofit that was studying to understand veteran homelessness and like chronic veteran homelessness. Yeah. And I just remember the way that they were talking about, this super serious and very complex like topic that I was just so immersed in as a social work practitioner. The way that they talked about it, they just like they took all of this complexity and they distilled it down to this like simple thing. And in the moment, I remember feeling both like fascinated and frustrated, thinking like, wow, like how is it that there are people who can like sweep in and talk to a few people and then like regurgitate like what they have heard and then come up with ideas as if we have not had ideas to like fix this issue or to address all of this like complexity from like a systems level. And so my initial more recent like intersection of this understanding definitely came from it definitely came from a place of like frustration with design as opposed to like one of admiration, which had been like the case in previous years. But I became really, really curious about approaches and methods and like why are designers and again at that time like design researchers, why are they approaching these complex and very serious issues that have like systemic implications and serious like ethical implications? Why
Yeah.
are they approaching that so simply? And so it's like this place of frustration served as this conduit of deep again like deep curiosity and kind of like excavation of like why are you doing it this way, and like this is how I would approach it as a social worker. And like as a social worker I have a code of ethics that I'm expected to abide by. I have practice standards. I have at least in the state of Illinois I have a license, and with that license comes responsibility. And so I became, you could say like I became like both like almost like fascinated, but also really like wanting to I didn't necessarily come in like wanting to like infuse social work into design. It came from much more of this lens of there's a better way to do this, and that better way is to do it with more care and consideration, ethical like guidelines and frameworks, and a set of practice standards that actually like make sure that we are taking care of ourselves just as much as we are taking care of and are designing for or with or at other people. And so it's just become like the way that I practice now. It's like I I I almost don't see, I mean, I don't see like design and social work as two separate disciplines. They are, the longer I practice with this intersectionality, they are becoming like truly like one new discipline for me. Like what they might be called, I don't know. That's why sometimes like I try to often introduce myself as a social worker designer. Like so not separating the two, but like what does it look like to be like a true like multi-passionate, multi-hyphenate as you're doing this work, and not abandon one discipline for the other, but really try to like center both at the same time. It's hard.
Oh, for sure. But I love that you mentioned a couple of things like how do we maybe how what's the urge that we tend to be having on fixing problems, and it's something so human, right? And on the other hand, I feel like there's these need of maybe witness what's happening surrounding us. And so how do we know when to witness, when to observe, when to support rather than just rush and fix something? And also in this current context, which is always been here, but that is like we need something now, and these additional pressure that we might have as designers to, you know, forget about, you know, the pace of different things. It just provide me a deliverable right now and I want results.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I want to say this with a little bit of a caveat of I don't take for granted the fact that I have the ability to fall back on and be able to adhere to a code of ethics. So because I am still a licensed clinical social worker in the state of Illinois, I still have those responsibilities and those obligations like as a practitioner who is licensed. And so I say that as a responsibility and less as a crutch that I lean on. Like even if I were not licensed, I take those things very, very seriously. And so when I think about like this question that you ask around like, how do we know? Like how do we know like whether or not we should be falling into that urge or that urgency or that tendency to actually like fix or to problem solve something versus maybe like witnessing. I think for me where what might be helpful is knowing that I have I have a community of peers who will help me hold myself accountable to the work. And
Yeah.
so again, like communities of practice cannot be underestimated in like the power that they are able to provide in terms of peer-to-peer support, supporting one another in like in both the day-to-day, but especially when like messier and more challenging and more complex situations like present themselves, as they often do. I mean, I've been very fortunate to be part of both social work communities of practice and design communities of practice over the course of, at this point, like over 16 years of being a practicing social worker. The design communities of practice that have come together, they have often come together like very informally and as a response to we need one another in order to both learn from, but also support as we are doing the thing, even if we aren't on the same team or even working for the same organization. So some of the, I mean, hands down, the most, I think, beautiful and like just remarkable like representation of this was most recently when I was with U.S. Digital Service, and this was with the VA. The team of practitioners that came together organically from feeling some of that urge. It's almost like there was this combination of feeling the real urgency of we need one another to also like have this practice, this consistent practice of witnessing one another, like while we were all doing the work. I don't think I don't think we like realized that this was like, that it truly was like a model of how to do it and how to do it extremely well and how to do it in a way that just really embodies all of these aspects of what it means to care for one another, to be responsible to others as well as like responsible to yourself, to practice like really like living in and embodying what it means to have integrity while doing this work. And again, like those aspects are like, what does it mean to be ethical and responsible and what have you. So my God, I mean, I could talk about that group for like the rest of the time. Some of them might be listening, you know. But yeah, it really like just beams immediately as like an example of a powerful example of how to do that and why it's also important to do that.
Yeah, you just made me think on how important it is to have a community to get the support you need, right? And I remember one of our projects a while ago in one of my jobs, and we were asking like, what is the ways that you have to debrief or to recover from a traumatic experience, right? And they were like, well, I just go to one of my colleagues. We support each other. What happened? And I guess that I was thinking, I'm not sure if I had that in a long time, because I was working as the only designer in my team, right? Sometimes, and I was doing projects by myself, leading it with, yes, a multidisciplinary team, but not really speaking my language. And I felt that I was holding a lot of the tension, the stories, the pressure. How do we do that when we don't have that community? Or how do we find ways to support each other? Is the only way like just trying to find another that feels exactly like we feel? I think that it's kind of like part of what we're creating this event, actually, right? I feel like it's not only a few of us. There's a lot of us that felt kind of like in this toxic kind of wheel of being by ourselves, defending or advocating for this approach and method, and all what it, we can stand behind it.
Yeah, I mean it's very easy when you are it's easy when you are an only or like a single person who is maybe part of a larger either team or a larger organization that either has this interest and curiosity around more trauma-informed, care-centered, even like equity-focused like practices. I've seen this just dozens and dozens of times. Like there's someone who is somewhere in like the messy middle of the work and they reach out, and it's like there are almost these times when I've been like very strategically like invited in to have a meeting with people that includes some like the next layers up in leadership, so that they can hear that so that they can truly just like hear an example of a different way of doing the work. And again, like I don't think there's been any like necessarily even like a hidden agenda, but I think it has come from, more often than not, this place of feeling like alone and isolated, and like hoping that others would maybe like understand like how lonely and isolated like practicing in a different kind of a way than the dominant mainstream can really, really feel. Something that I did suggest, like, many times over, like over the years, is that if you don't have anyone in the place where you are now, like, then who can you go to? Is it a trusted friend? Is it a trusted peer? Is it someone that's in your family? Is there someone who maybe you had gone to school with? I mean, like are you able to identify someone? Are there these different communities of practice that are both like formal and informal, like meeting virtually, not meeting virtually? I mean, there's a lot of different spaces. And, and the evolution of those has really shifted like in more recent years, in large part because of like the crux of the pandemic. And those communities are going through their own, I think, re-identification of what they want them to look like, which I think is one of the reasons why a conference and a gathering like Service Design Disrupted has come to present itself. It's like people are looking for different types of places and spaces where they can come together and speak more honestly and really like accurately about what they're experiencing and what they are witnessing and seeing like across the field, but also like in whatever their domain might be. So the isolation and the aloneism, like, it's very, very real. If there's anything that I can offer as like reassurance, is that no one is alone in this. So even if you might be an only where you are working, or if you're an individual practitioner who does freelance work, like I'm an independent practitioner. Like I work with teams, but I don't have like colleagues and coworkers like at home with me. I have to really like seek that out. I have to find what works for me and like my style and my workload, and my balance that with like my family life and my personal life and other things of that nature. So there's no like perfect formula that's going to fit. Like what works for me like may not work for other people. But I think there's a matter of like identifying like what are those pieces that you need at this point in your life, because what you might need now may look different than what you might need in a few years, or it definitely will look different like as you like in 10 years or 15 years. Like the technology is going to continue to shift and change too. And so the tools can sometimes be so expansive and give us more opportunity and ability to interact with one another. And at the same time, it can also be like overwhelming and therefore limiting, because we have too many options and too many ways to be able to constantly like interact and come together. I have found, and I think I shared this with you and Warner, like, last week, is that I've had some very interesting in-person experiences over the past year. And, one that was truly like practitioner heavy, very like practitioner focused, was the Service Design and Government conference that was typically it's in like September in Scotland. And it was unbelievable to be in a space with so many other practitioners in government contexts. I felt like I was in conversation with people and not being talked at, which is a very, very different experience from so many other conferences and things that I've attended and sometimes have spoken at over the years too. So I think people are really like yearning for different aspects of community and different shades of what community could be. There are, again, thinking about that conference in Edinburgh last year, there were people who I got to meet for the first time that I had not met and had conversations with like over like a number of months, if not years. There are people who I met for the first time, and there are just things that they shared with me that I would not have learned otherwise if we had not had that in-person interaction and opportunity for a conversation. So if there, I would encourage, like, not all connection needs to happen like in person, but it is very, very powerful for a lot of people to have that opportunity to be able to come together in person. I mean, I benefit from both. I want and need the virtual, and I want and need like in-person interaction with other people.
Sorry to interrupt you guys. There's some great comments coming through, and I'm just popping them on the screen, people singing your praises. But I thought this one I will just interrupt to just tag onto what you were talking about, is that Martha Wilkes mentioned in LinkedIn that they have a public trauma practice channel in Slack that may be a way to find like-minded folks in the organization, even if it's not designers themselves, which I think is interesting.
Definitely. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, that's a great example. Martha is a dear friend and colleague.
There's definitely places where to find it, right? I think it's just a matter of you made me think, and I think it's connected to this. Like as designers, we tend to see our practice as very reflective instead of being more reflexive. And you made a post recently about that, and kind of like made me think a lot about how I want to work, including myself in it, right? And it's kind of like connected to that. What do you think that maybe what does good listening look? No, what changes when designers are they realize, as I did recently, maybe that we are also part of the system that we're working on.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of this, there's a notion of reflexivity that is talked about so much in social work, and so again, sometimes it's one of those things that I take for granted in the social work parts of my life, and so then when I see evidence of that, or maybe a lack of evidence of that in design, it's like, oh, like I feel like there's this like yearning for some of that language, and that maybe isn't as familiar to designers, again, because like I'm trying to straddle between both of these worlds, and like, and there's uniquely distinct but also overlapping language between both of these. But I think this practice of reflection, I feel like is becoming more, I think people are warming up to like the value and the importance of having some aspect of a reflective practice. And there isn't a single human-centered design, or even like trauma-informed design, like article or piece of writing that is out there that doesn't mention some aspect of like the value of like the reflective practitioner. It's like that work and that like body of work is often like cited. But then there's this practice of reflexivity, which is like, I feel like the easiest way to like describe it is that like reflection is saying like, I'm looking at the system and I want to better understand like the system. But reflexivity is saying like, I am part of that system. And so it's like, what is the interplay and the interconnection and the relationship between those two things? So it's one thing, and believe me, I get caught up in this so much myself. It is so easy, especially when I think about public interest design and civic technology. Mm-hmm. Like I am often very I'm very reactive in my reflexivity or in my reflection of observing things, even though I am part of this system. So there are times when I find myself being, I'll just self-identify as being like maybe a little too critical of this system, as if I am not part of it. And then I think, well, wait a minute, I'm an active contributor in this. I have been a very active contributor in this, like over the past several years at this point. So what does it mean to be like critical, and not critical in a judgmental way, but to have an opinion, to have a voice, to be making contributions to this system that I am also part of? I'm not the system in its entirety, but I am part of it.
Right.
And those contributions matter. There was an interesting, like when you think about like these waves and these like shifts that have happened in human-centered design over the years, like there was a really interesting like shift that was occurring at this point, maybe like 4, 5, 6 years ago. And it was around this, there was kind of this push to decenter the practitioner in all of this, to make sure that we are centering the people that we were like designing for, or to center the participant,
neutral, right? And we have to be
we have to be neutral. Like, and again, like I can both appreciate and understand like the motivation for that. And I remember like feeling nervous that if we were de-emphasizing like our presence and our role in this work, then what was that going to do? Was that going to have an effect on our own like personal and professional development? Would we put any of our needs, if we have needs, like secondary, or like, just or completely minimize them, or just even completely abandon them? So as someone who is focused so much more on, again, like these more like complicated, like serious, like, pretty trauma inducing and trauma heavy, like design context, I was getting nervous that we were not considering ourselves as part of these equations. And so I think this is where some of that, and again, I feel like I'm starting to see like sprinklings of that. Like, it's not about us. We need to be concerned about this, like whoever this universal other is. And I feel like reflexivity brings us back into the fold and like reminds us that, yes, we are also part of the system, but sometimes we are the users and we are the customers and we are the benefactors of these systems as well. Like I saw this often in the work at US Digital Service. I mean, it was rare to encounter someone who was also not a recipient of the service or the thing that we were designing or that we were trying to improve. So if we pretend that we are not part of that, either as a user or as a practitioner, then what is that doing? Like, what is that doing to us, like individually? What is that doing to us, like collectively, within our organizations, within these larger systems? I just feel like it's a component to definitely not lose sight of.
Yeah. I think that definitely is something that like just recognizing the fact that we are somehow biased because we're part of that system. It's just like a step forward towards thinking differently. But also there's moments that you want to keep the boundaries, right? Like, how do you think about boundaries when people, like, I don't know, they bring real difficulty into professional spaces, and that could be in public spaces, but also in, if you work on financial or different other, systems, right, that are not really social oriented. How do you think that would work for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think boundaries are a part of care. I don't think I don't see it as like an opposite of care by any means. I think when, I think about some people and I think about my own ways of working, again, like over the years, like I felt like being available and being constantly available and being always on meant that just meant that like, oh, like that was a demonstration of care. And what it was more of an abandoning of myself and both my needs and the needs of others in my immediate little family. I think, one of the things that social work has done well for me is that it has taught me the importance of understanding like my scope. Like, what is my scope of practice? What does it mean to refer a situation out when it is like out of my bounds or out of my ability to actually be able to assist with or to resolve? When and where do I need support or assistance from others? Again, like I early on in practice, I got many repetitions of what that looked like in practice. It also like taught me just like the value and the importance of supervision. So supervision as a practice of a peer, and typically a more senior peer, who is like witnessing your work, who is hearing about the types of things that you are navigating and dealing with and trying to like work through in a given week, but is taking that like protected time to actually like digest and debrief and like discuss, and troubleshoot how you might do things. So supervision as a practice is very different from like my supervisor, which, again, a different kind of like hierarchical like setup. Um, I think I think the thing about design that I have noticed, over and over and over again, is that design is often inviting incredibly difficult stories without any kind of like structure for how to actually responsibly and ethically like hold them and to navigate them. And so, one way to think of this is like, do we use some of this language and this framework around boundaries to help people stay available, when appropriate, without becoming like super overwhelmed by what we are being exposed to, or the ways that we are working. So, yeah, because I think it's twofold. I think it's sometimes the topics and the subject matter can have its own type of trauma history and exposure, but then there's also the ways that we are working can also be like deeply traumatic because it's very stressful, it's super overwhelming. And the worst case is when you have both of those happening, when you're working on a pretty serious and complex like subject matter, and the pacing is just absolutely absurd and ridiculous, and it by default becomes this like secondary wound of being overwhelming. I don't, I mean, I just don't think we are physiologically, like, we are not designed to carry that kind of overwhelm for long periods of time. Like, our fight or flight is a natural human response that is for when we are in a very serious like situation that is supposed to be life-saving. That is not a way we are supposed to be working on a daily basis.
Yeah. There's also something that I've been thinking a lot is like there's different types of trauma, right? And I think that if you talk about trauma to, people maybe who's not a social worker or who's not educated in the field or understands the variety of the different ways to explicitly talk about trauma, um, they would think that those like are big, capital words, and maybe they wouldn't consider that they experience trauma themselves. But actually, I was rereading, in fact, one of your articles, and it stuck with me one quote from Ramani Durva. I hope I'm not mispronouncing the surname here, Durvasula, maybe. And it says something like, once you start spending enough time with enough toxic people, you run the risk of losing some of your own empathy, simply because you aren't ever being given any. And I will really want to say that because, again, I think that if we're coming from, more social oriented work, maybe we think about all those things, but what happens with people that maybe service design could be applied to so many different, scopes, how we can, help them understand their own story around, how to protect themselves, how to, include trauma-informed care, and what they should learn from it.
Yeah, I know the quote is a powerful one, and it was definitely the quote. I think the context in which she shared that was in talking about toxic workplaces, working with maybe like more like narcissistic or bosses who have like narcissistic
something that I'm sure that everyone can relate to, right, at some point of their careers.
Yeah, I think a lot of people can relate to it. And the piece that it is like reminding me of is, there's the metaphor of making sure that you are putting on your own oxygen mask before you are helping others. I mean, so that's one thing to make sure that we're taking into consideration. I think another is just making sure that that we are not unaffected. It's okay to be affected by this work, like it is in fact, I think it's actually pretty human to be affected by design. We live in such ways that we are surrounded by many things that are designed that are amazing and beautiful and are full of care, as well as things that are careless and are full of harm and have like lingering consequences. So it's not like everything is like bad and we need to be cautious. It's more of a like, where are there these opportunities for influence and for doing things differently, for challenging this dominant narrative of a default mode. I think about, when I think about some of these, some of the ways to talk about this, like I find myself even in this moment, like wearing this hat of like social worker and designer, where I am like I'm immediately recalling things that like wise social work practitioners have said over the years, either to me directly or that they've said as part of like their work. And I think one of the most important things that we can do is to give ourselves like that margin of care, that margin of time to be able to notice these things, so that we can maybe like either interrogate them or disrupt them enough or slow them down enough to consider doing things differently. For me, that's needed to be. It's been essential to not just question things, but I think to really like wonder, like, is there a different way that we could be doing this and still arrive at like a good, reasonable like outcome? I believe yes, and more often than not, like I believe that is the case. Yeah.
So to finish in a very, positive note, hopefully, what do you think is just one small act that everyone here could do to can practice this week or today in our own work or with ourselves?
I think, I think that there is value in tracking the evidence of care, like and that might look like you're keeping a journal or a notebook or a stack of Post-its or scraps of paper, and you're making note where these things are showing up. I mean, even when we were preparing for this, like one of the things that I mentioned, and that I've been trying to more actively like mention this as opposed to like keep this to myself, like when I see and or experience or witness this kind of like evidence of care, it's to let people know like that, like, hey, I really liked like what you did here. I appreciate that you sent me like a document 4 days in advance to be able to read it at my own pace, to let me marinate on it, to like allow this to soak in, to give me that, again, like this like luxury of time to process, to both like reflect and reflex on whatever this thing was. Or there's a just a fantastic workshop that I like took part in a couple of weeks ago with Tracy Worley, who does a lot of work around matriarchal futures, and I have on my to-do list to just like send her a note of appreciation for what she's doing, for the way that she set up this workshop, for the timing of when information was shared with us in advance. I mean, again, like I feel like as practitioners, like we owe that to both ourselves to receive that those notes of gratitude when they are shared with us, but also to give those notes of gratitude and to let people know, like when we are witnessing like these these like positive effects of these types of like evidences of care. I just feel like it's a hopeful way of again contributing to the practice, but also letting people know that like, hey, I appreciate what you're doing, and I also appreciate how you are doing what you're doing. I mean, I sent a different note to someone who wrote this a fantastic like Medium piece at this point, maybe 5 years ago. And I reread it yesterday, and then I listened to it, and then I thought like I feel like I need to like write this person and let them know that what they wrote 5 years ago, it's like they could have written it like today, and it's just as powerful, it's just as meaningful. And so like I think to share those things that in a way that is like, you know, generous and is appreciative of what others are doing. I feel like that feels like a gift to me to be able to say those types of things to other people. And again, it feeds that reflective and reflexive part of the work that we were talking about.
Rachael, Andrea, thank you so much. Like I'm dipping in here. I could listen even more. This was great. Thank you. And
talk even more.
Yeah, like, but I also wanted to say, like, because your reflection, as you mentioned, came through in our first conversation when we were doing the preparation, and like even today, my wife and I were talking about something that happened, and I was kind of thinking about what you told us when you said you reflected on that moment of care, and I looked at something that was inherently perceived as not a positive experience, and I tried to see how this person who reacted to something my wife said was actually saying what she's saying because she cared. And then it gives a bit of a different perspective on it, because I think at the moment we want more positive things, and I also think it comes from us. Like you've put down the challenge, Rachael, is rather than correcting someone, is to actually reach out and say, I think what you've done here is really cool. I think this just inspires people to do more of it. So yeah, I'm probably going to go away and not do it, but I'm inspired.
We'll hold you accountable, you know.
And I just want to say thanks, Andrea, also to you for this conversation. Rock and roll. So this is it for us. The other thing is, Rachael, I didn't interrupt too much, but there was a lot of comments, and there was a lot of love shown in the comments from a lot of people I think you know, and people that hopefully will get to meet you in Barcelona. So very much a positive stream, I must admit. But I didn't want to interrupt you to say like, hey, you're great, right? Maybe I should have, but it was really great. So. That being said, Rachael, thank you so much. Andrea, thank you so much. And looking forward to seeing you both. Andrea, you sooner, but Rachael, you in Barcelona very soon.
Absolutely. Thanks, you too.
Thank you so much, Rachael. Thank you very
much. Thank you very much, everybody, for watching. If you catch this in the replay, please pop your questions also in the chat. But then, as I mentioned, you can go and meet Rachael and the lovely Andrea here in Barcelona on the 15th to 16th of October. Go to sddisrupted.com, get your ticket, sign up for our newsletter if you want to stay in touch. If we have anything that we want to share, we will do it there. And yes, next week we will return on Thursday, 7 p.m. CET, with another conversation with one of our speakers. We'll post more about that on Monday. Thank you for joining, and hopefully see you all in Barcelona.